Hello everybody, I hope you're all well. It feels pretty safe to say that most of us didn't know who Chappell Roan was this time last year. She has experienced probably one of the most rapid rises to fame of any music artist in the past couple of years. The only person I can think of comparing her to is Ice Spice. Just to put this rapid rise of fame into context, when Chappell released her debut album, The Rise and Fall of the Midwest Princess, she had around 1 million monthly Spotify listeners, and by August she had 40 million monthly Spotify listeners. With this newfound fame obviously came a whole new lifestyle and honestly a whole level of exposure that I don't think any of us can truly comprehend. Chappell has shared some thoughts and tried to assert some boundaries with her fans. She's criticized fans for creepy behavior, which includes following her and her family, online bullying, people yelling at her on the street, and confrontations when she declines photos or hugs. Chappell has also shared that when she isn't at a work event, she is clocked out, and she rejects the notion that she owes time or energy to essentially strangers. Chappell has also gotten into controversy over her interactions with paparazzi and also her refusal to endorse Kamala Harris. Now, this video essay isn't going to be all the ways in which I think Chappell Roan is right, because there's been so many video essays made about that already. I will leave some linked down below. I mean, the long and short of it, do I think people are doing absolutely too much when it comes to Chappell Roan? Yes. Do I think there is a lot of "we have built you up, so we are going to knock you down" phenomenon occurring? Absolutely. But because I've seen so many videos defending Chappell, I want to come from a different perspective, and that perspective is tabloid surveillance culture. I think when we think of tabloids, we have a tendency to think of tabloids when they were in their golden age. We think of tabloids as something of the past. You know, the late 90s, the early 2000s, the paparazzi regularly invading celebrities' personal space and privacy, tabloid magazines regularly defaming celebrities and paying for private and confidential information about said celebrities. This is very looked down upon now. Although this journalism still exists, it's absolutely nowhere near as popular as it was in its heyday around 20 years ago. But I'm here to argue that tabloidism, which yes, is a word that I have made up, but I'm going to use it anyway. Tabloidism isn't far behind us in the slightest, and if anything, we are playing the biggest role in it than we ever have before. And of course, tabloidism goes hand in hand with surveillance culture. I don't want to get too into it right now. I don't want to give any spoilers for the video, but the digital age has escalated surveillance culture to new highs. We now all play a significant role in surveillance culture. Whether we're surveilling ourselves, whether we're surveilling others, we all now wield the power to surveil, which is something that wasn't even possible 50 years ago. As you guys can probably tell, I'm really excited to get into today's video, but just before we do, I would love to thank Skillshare for sponsoring another video. Thank you, Skillshare. As you guys will probably know, I've recently brought a researcher onto Team Jordantheresa, researcher Leanne. We all love researcher Leanne. And with this new member of my team comes a whole other reason to be more organized. Both researcher Leanne and editor Kath know that I am not the most organized queen, and I'm trying to be more organized in 2024 going into 2025. But you know what goes hand in hand with organization? Productivity. So this month I decided to take Ali Abdul's How to Organize Workflow to Maximize Productivity class. Ali really does hit all of the points in this class, like motivation techniques, overcoming inertia, achieving flow, and managing distractions, and so much more. Like guys, so much more. This class is bursting at the seams with information. All of this has not only helped me be a more productive queen, but has also helped me become more organized with my workflow, which is not only beneficial for me, but it's beneficial for my team as well. Skillshare are longtime sponsors of my channel. They are the largest online learning community for creatives with thousands of classes led by industry experts. When I'm telling you Skillshare has a class on everything, Skillshare has a class on everything. I'm talking productivity, learning an instrument, illustration, how to use Notion, Photoshop, entrepreneurship, looking after plants. The list goes on. With Skillshare, you can take your career, skills, hobbies, passions, and side hustles to the next level. Not only do Skillshare have a wide range of classes, but Skillshare also have learning paths. It's one of my favorite parts about Skillshare. I've raved about them so many times before. They are curated sequential class collections, which are organized by subject rather than by teacher, meaning you get to learn so much about a particular subject in all different kinds of teaching styles, which for me really keeps me engaged. The first 500 people to sign up using my link in the description will get a 1 month free trial of Skillshare. So make sure you sign up using the link in the description. Thank you so much again, Skillshare, for sponsoring today's video, and let's get into it. To learn the origins of the tabloid press, we have to take it all the way back to the 1890s. This story has two key players. We have Joseph Pulitzer's New York World and William Randolph Hearst's New York Journal. These two papers were in an intense circulation war with one another, and to try and beat each other in the sales, both deployed yellow journalism tactics. Some of these include bold, attention-grabbing headlines, heavy use of images and illustrations, emphasis on crime, scandal, and gossip, and either exaggerated or completely fabricated stories. Does this sound familiar to you guys? As you guys can probably piece together yourselves, yellow journalism has now evolved to what we know as tabloid journalism, which shares all of the key characteristics of yellow journalism. I do think it's important to note why tabloid journalism is popular and has remained popular over the past century. Obviously, tabloid journalism and yellow journalism plays into our natural human desire for gossip. Now, I do want to make it clear that not all gossip is negative. Gossip simply means that you're talking about someone who isn't present. I could actually make an entire video essay in defense of gossip, but I feel like that's more of a podcast moment. But studies have shown that people hearing good or bad gossip about themselves or negative gossip in general causes more activity in the cortex of their brains. And this same study found that more activity in the reward center of our brain when we hear negative gossip about celebrities. And when it comes to our desires for negative celebrity gossip, obviously deriving pleasure from people's pain absolutely plays a role. I've already spoken about this more in depth in my video about Catfish the TV show if you want to know more. But in essence, our brains are hardwired to be haters. And psychological effects of gossip aside, tabloids are a form of entertainment. They hit all of the reward centers in our brains. They activate all of the neurons. It's a fast-paced news cycle that no matter what, there will always be something new to read. Whether it's based in any truth is a whole other matter. Tabloids use flashy and engaging headlines to get people to click. Even the colors which are used in more traditional tabloids are usually colors like yellow and pink, really attention grabbing. The images they use are always a little bit overexposed. They usually got the contrast and the color whacked up a little bit. And not only are tabloids really engaging, but they're also really addictive as well. As soon as the most recent celebrity gossip begins to wear off, people hunt for more. The tabloids would not be able to exist without the paparazzi and vice versa. The term paparazzi originated from the 1960 film La Dolce Vita after the character Paparazzo, who was a persistent photographer. But paparazzi far predated this film. In the 1950s, street photographers began targeting movie stars to get candid and unposed pictures. And I believe this was in Rome they were doing this. The paparazzi upped these tactics in the 60s and 70s, opting to be extremely intrusive, moving in packs in order to be more intimidating, in hopes of catching a scandalous image in the middle of a high-intensity chase. Similarly to the golden age of the tabloids, the golden age of paparazzi was around the 90s and the 2000s. With the rise of tabloid magazines came an increase of demand of paparazzi pictures, and some of these pictures could go for upwards of 6 figures. Now, the paparazzi industry more recently has experienced quite the decline, quite the lull. But before we get into that, why don't we talk about some notable tabloid and paparazzi moments just to set the scene. The death of Princess Diana is probably the most notable tabloid paparazzi scandal. She was killed in a car accident being chased down by paparazzi. And staying on the topic of royals, Meghan Markle was really gravely hounded and harassed by tabloid press in this country. There was also the tabloid phone hacking scandal, which involved the News of the World. Whenever I speak about this, I'm surprised by the amount of people that don't know about this. Listen up. Essentially, the newspaper, the News of the World, would hack into people's phones to get stories. They hacked into the royal family's phones. They hacked into relatives of deceased British soldiers, the victims of the 7/7 bombings, missing teenager Millie Dowler. And what the News of the World did was they were wiping voicemails from her phone to make room for new ones, which led the police and her family to believe that she was still alive when really she was murdered the day she went missing. The exploitation of addiction by tabloids. Many celebrities who have suffered from addiction problems were never given the privacy, the time, or the grace to recover. Whitney Houston, Amy Winehouse, just to name a few. Now, I'm not a Sam Taylor Johnson stan by any means, but I do think she hit the nail on the head with this quote. There's a reason why these recovering programs are called Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, because you need anonymity and privacy to deal with addiction. And Amy was never afforded privacy. They hounded and humiliated her. I think one of the most egregious examples of tabloid dehumanization was the documentation of Britney Spears during her public mental breakdown in 2007. And something which immediately pops into my head when I think of almost, I guess, low-level tabloid harassment. By low level, I mean this is, commonly occurring. And that is the treatment of Jennifer Aniston's fertility by the tabloid press. I don't see that many people talking about this, but for decades, Jennifer Aniston's pregnancy status, fertility status has been all the tabloid press have spoken about. Headlines upon headlines for well over a decade. Jennifer Aniston actually wrote a very touching essay for the Huffington Post in response to yet another pregnancy rumor. This past month in particular has illuminated for me how much we define a woman's value based on her marital and maternal status. The sheer amount of resources being spent right now by press trying to simply uncover whether or not I am pregnant for the bajillionth time, but who's counting, points to the perpetuation of this notion that women are somehow incomplete, unsuccessful, or unhappy if they're not married with children. In this last boring news cycle about my personal life, there have been mass shootings, wildfires, major decisions by the Supreme Court, an upcoming election, and any number of more newsworthy issues that journalists could dedicate their resources towards. If we just circle back to the paparazzi for a moment, as you guys can probably imagine, with the rise of technology, it's giving Black Mirror technology, with technological advancements and also the rise of social media, as you can imagine, this is really putting some pressure on paparazzi. They're finding it difficult to keep up. Good. Now anybody can take a picture of a celebrity in public and just post it onto social media and not sell it to a tabloid. Celebrities can now control their image using social media. They can post as many candid pictures of themselves doing normal everyday things, meaning that the value of candid pictures of celebrities doing normal everyday things taken by paparazzi has reduced significantly in the past 10 years. The rise of social media, alongside the ethics of paparazzi being questioned in the last 20 years, introductions of anti-stalking laws and celebrities taking restraining orders against certain paparazzi. The paparazzi industry isn't completely obsolete. A lot of celebrities work with paparazzi for publicity, to curate their image, but the paparazzi doesn't seem to have quite the same infamy as they did 20 years ago. And something really interesting that Leanne mentioned in her research, and this is something that I actually haven't considered before, is the uncomfortable gender dynamics at play when it comes to the paparazzi. And I just want to make it very clear that there have been so many male celebrities who have been victims of paparazzi harassment. But I would say that tabloid harassment does impact women more. And for a lack of a better term, there is something just really icky about large groups of men chasing down young female celebrities trying to get a picture of them. At its worst, it reminds me of this story that Emma Watson has shared, where she said on her 18th birthday, there were paparazzi lying on the floor taking pictures up her skirt. And just before we talk about the modernization of tabloids, I think it's important to quickly highlight how tabloids and newspapers are regulated in this country. Because as I was reading the research and as I was writing, I was sort of thinking to myself, how the hell is this all legal? Well, it turns out that the press in the UK are self-regulated. There are no statutory regulations, press council, or even a formal complaints body. This is going to get real wordy, so don't mind me if I'm reading straight off the script. This is very wordy. Most UK newspapers are regulated by the Independent Press Standard Organisation, the IPSO, who essentially enforce a code of practice, which covers issues of ethics like defamation, privacy, harassment, intrusion, discrimination, and obviously tabloids are subject to the law, which includes defamation, harassment, hate speech, and obscenity. Now, whether the IPSO regularly enforce their code is a whole other question. Regulation occurs after publication, not before, and many of these rules can be overridden if there is a large public interest in a particular story. The IPSO rarely uses their power to fine publishers, and membership to the IPSO is completely voluntary, and a few major UK newspapers have opted not to join. Now, the IPSO was only established in 2014 after, you guessed it, the News of the World phone hacking scandal. Impress was also set up as an alternative regulator, and to quote Leanne's research, a new system of press regulation was established through a royal charter, creating an oversight body that cannot be altered without a 2/3 parliamentary majority. New legislation was introduced where publications are now fined for not joining a regulator and are also offered financial protection in defamation or breaches of privacy cases, and the definition of a publisher has broadened to include digital publications. In essence, tabloids kind of get away with murder because they're self-regulated, and I do just want to make it clear that I don't know what my stance is on self-regulation versus statutory regulation, because I can imagine that the introduction of government statutory regulation could be an issue of freedom of speech. It could be an issue of censorship. You know, I don't know enough about it to form a fully fledged opinion. But with this shift from print media to digital media, tabloids have obviously had to try and modernize. So let's talk about that. Print tabloids are still in circulation, but like all print media, have taken a massive hit as people have shifted from buying print media to just reading everything digitally. But tabloids have clocked onto this and have began to adapt to this digital landscape. First and most obvious one being that most tabloids have a website now. Most tabloids have gone digital. They have their own social media accounts. The most egregious online tabloid is probably TMZ. I don't even like uttering the name. Most recently, TMZ published photographs of Liam Payne's dead body. Nearly all major tabloids have TikTok accounts, and an example that really stands out to me actually is Snapchat tabloids. Does anyone remember Snapchat tabloids? I used to be obsessed with these when I was a teenager. They're basically like bite-sized tabloids that you just click on and you click through, and all of the stories were always about that Demi Rose Instagram model. I don't know. I'd love to know what you guys think of this, but one part of tabloid modernization, I believe, are in this country, tabloids posing as newspapers. Now, I don't know whether this is an exclusively UK problem, but in this country, there are a lot of right-wing tabloids who are almost posing as centrist newspapers. You know, The Sun, the Daily Mail, who a lot of people who read them don't know that they're reading stuff that's incredibly right-wing and incredibly biased. But it's not just already existing tabloids modernizing themselves. There also seems to be a new wave of tabloid media or tabloid style media, such as Dumois, an Instagram page which publishes essentially all things celebrity news and pop culture. You know, they have an app, a newsletter, a podcast, and they're very well known for publicizing anonymous celebrity information, also known as blind items, sent in by their followers. Dumois receives over 100 tips per day, and I will say that Dumois is nowhere near as negative or as scandalous as a traditional tabloid. In fact, Dumois tends to avoid the more sad and negative stories, opting to focus on things that are a bit more trivial, and any stories that lean more negatively, the names won't be publicized. Now, the second example of a new wave tabloid, which I think I am going to get some flack for, is Pop Crave. Yeah, I said it. They're a Twitter account that essentially tweets out all celebrity news and pop culture in real time. And what I will give Pop Crave credit for is that they do provide all of the sources of their information. But Pop Crave not only emulates the speed of traditional tabloid culture and that there's always something new to share, but Pop Crave do play into scandals and most importantly trigger conversations about said scandals and discourse through the quote tweets and replies. Now, what I think is, you know, the closest thing we have to a traditional tabloid, you know, in the new wave of tabloids are drama channels. And I feel like I feel like I'm gonna be ruffling some feathers. I'm scared. But hear me out. Drama channels regularly use attention-grabbing titles in all capitals, colorful and eye-catching thumbnails. Some would argue that these thumbnails replicate that of a modern tabloid, and the most obvious shared trait is only discussing scandals or negative stories. I do also think that drama channels are guilty of over-reporting, which is something that the tabloid press are so good at doing. Reference to Jennifer Aniston's over 10 years of pregnancy rumors, making tens of hundreds of videos of the same influencer. It does mirror tabloid harassment, and drama channels do potentially report inaccurate information or fabricated stories and hide behind the word allegedly. Now, as a YouTuber myself, I'm a little bit of a YouTuber myself, I understand the power and, you know, the use of the word allegedly. I get it. As, you know, when you're in this job, you really do have to protect yourself legally. But I do believe that some people, you know, the word allegedly is doing a little bit of heavy lifting. Social media has really democratized journalism. Everybody has a voice now. And I think that the democratization of journalism is an objective good. Journalism is another one of those industries that's very elitist. 54% of the country's leading news journalists were privately educated, compared to just 7% of the UK population. Democratization of journalism is good. Giving people a voice who have not had one otherwise is good. But this democratization has come with an increase of journalistic entities who aren't following any journalistic code or being regulated. And again, I don't really know my stance on like journalism regulation because I don't know enough about it. You know, I'm sure there are arguments of impeding on freedom of speech and censorship if there was like statutory government regulation of journalism. I don't know enough to form a strong opinion yet, but I do think that when drama channels are confronted with the hazy ethics of what they do, they often fall back on the crux of claiming that they are a journalist. They'll say, well, this is just my job. I'm a journalist. If you're a journalist, why aren't you signed up to a regulator? If you're a journalist, why aren't you following any journalistic code? I think a really interesting aspect of social media's impact on the news cycle is the power of the algorithm, right? If not all, social media apps and websites have an algorithm, meaning they're tracking what you're watching. They are pushing more things which they know that you will like, pushing more things that are similar to what you'll like to keep you using their app or website for longer, essentially creating an echo chamber. You know, if we tie this all back to Chapel Roan, and I'm going to talk more about Chapel Roan in the next segment of this video, but I think something that's really happening here is over amplification. And when I think about these modern, new wave of tabloids, pop crave, drama channels, they are not only contributing to conversations about Chapel Roan, but they're also triggering them. Obviously, I don't know what happens in, what goes down in the pop crave headquarters, but it's just smart business decision making to tweet about highly engaging topics. And one of these topics is Chapel Roan. And I think this is where pop crave begin to remind me of a tabloid, the over amplification, the over reporting for their own benefit, often taking things out of context. Pop crave do instigate conversations rather than contribute to them. And this leads to my next argument and my next segment of this video. And that is that we are the tabloids now. So let's talk about TikTok tabloids and surveillance culture. In 2021, TikTok user Lauren Zaras posted a video of herself surprising her boyfriend at college. I think you guys will probably remember this. And her boyfriend became known as Couch Guy. Not only did this TikTok amass nearly 1 billion views, but it triggered off a frenzy. In the comments section, thousands of TikToks trying to decipher the situation between Couch Guy and his girlfriend. Is he cheating on his girlfriend? Was he happy or sad to see her? Who are the 3 girls he was sitting on the couch with? This 20-second long TikTok hit such a sweet spot of TikTok virality that it was all everyone was talking about for around a month, which, if you know in TikTok terms, is a very long time. Most drama on TikTok blows over in a few days. And Couch Guy, alongside West Elm Caleb, the makeup artist who was kicked out of her client's wedding, and any TikTok involving if your husband was taking X flight at X time he is cheating on you, are just a handful of many examples of TikTok tabloids. Stories which share many of the traits of a traditional tabloid, involving scandal. TikToks made about these stories often have attention-grabbing hooks at the beginning. The way that people speak is often, very snappy and very engaging, and often these TikTok tabloids trigger more conversation about these scandals, and more importantly, stories and theories are completely fabricated about these scandals. The key difference here is that these scandals don't involve celebrities. They involve regular people like me and you, who are either surveilling themselves or they are being surveilled by someone else. The term TikTok tabloid was coined by The Conversation. Together, these stories represent the emergence of what I call the TikTok tabloid, in which users collectively manufacture and dramatize stories like an investigative gossip reel. Traditional tabloids place the lurid limelight on celebrities and public figures, but the TikTok tabloid targets everyday people. I think what's especially sinister about TikTok tabloids is that it makes villains out of regular people like me and you. It's a form of vigilante justice in a way. Sorry, the sun is beginning to set. I haven't quite adapted to daylight savings yet, but I will say the lighting is kind of giving. And these everyday people, they didn't sign up for this. They don't have PR teams. Their fame has been so rapid that they've had zero time to adjust, to mentally prepare themselves. A lot of people are launched into infamy without ever wanting to be famous. And it's no longer the many watching the few like it was 20 years ago. It's now the many watching the many. TikTok tabloids are just one example of surveillance culture. And the way that surveillance culture differs from a surveillance state is that surveillance culture is where surveillance has become so normalized, so practiced, and so rewarded that it is seen as a way of life. And I think the most interesting aspect of surveillance culture is that we have become active and willing participants in it. And social media's role is integral to this culture. Surveillance culture and tabloidism, whether it's modern or traditional, go hand in hand. And surveillance culture's impact on the way we behave is something I could talk about for hours. But obviously, guys, we gotta talk about the panopticon. Yeah. The panopticon is the perfect way to illustrate this. The panopticon was theorized in Michael Foucault's 1977 work, Discipline and Punishment, and it's a building design where there is one watchtower in the middle and everything else is surrounding it. And the idea is that everybody in this building can be surveilled by just one person, because just the possibility that they are being watched will cause people to begin self-regulating their own behavior. The mere idea of constant surveillance equals self-regulation. The panopticon can be applied to any system or institution, not just prisons, and it spreads even further than physical institutions. It's a metaphor. And what better to describe our current culture of social media surveillance than a modern day panopticon? There is no authoritative or sovereign figure driving the surveillance or facilitating this. The surveillance is being diffused throughout society. The lines between the watched and the watcher are so heavily blurred because we are all doing it to each other and to ourselves. And not only has the constant presence of surveillance helped normalize this behavior, but I could put money on it now that you could scroll through 10 TikToks right now and at least one would be someone being filmed without their knowledge or consent. And because of this ever-present surveillance, people have begun self-regulating their own behavior as if they are being filmed without their knowledge and it could possibly be posted onto TikTok. Everyone regulates their behavior in public out of fear that they are being filmed by someone. I actually saw a tweet the other day where someone was questioning why people don't get down in the club like they used to, and someone quote tweeted it and said it's because everyone's afraid of being filmed and it being posted onto TikTok. Just the potential of being surveilled leads people to self-censor and regulate and conform. To quote Leanne's research, this symbolizes how modern power operates by getting individuals to internalize norms and discipline themselves rather than solely on external force. And I think an aspect of surveillance culture that makes it particularly pervasive is the fact that surveillance culture is rewarded. Social media virality not only makes people feel good because it's an endorphin rush, but also social media virality, it's currency. You can build an entire career from social media virality. I have built an entire career from self-surveillance and social media. Surveilling ourselves and surveilling others will always continue for as long as it is rewarded. Now, we all know here that surveillance has become so normalized because it is so ever present in our society, right? Through CCTV, mobile phones, social media, technological advancements, etc. But something I want to flesh out a little more is surveillance as an act of love. A vast majority of us surveil our friends through social media. I surveil my friends through social media. And when I'm scrolling on Instagram, the posts that I look forward to seeing the most and the stories I look forward to seeing the most are stories from my friends, not stories from celebrities, not stories from influencers. And this isn't a bad thing because there are friends who I truly deeply love, but we just don't get to see each other all that much anymore. And it feels really nice to be able to keep up with their lives, even if we do only see each other a few times a year. But anyways, I digress. You know, there are other ways that people surveil the people in their life out of love. You know, all of my friends track each other's location. My family uses Life 360. A lot of people genuinely do surveil each other from a place of love. And this is a thought that I want to stay on when talking about tabloid surveillance culture and specifically Chapel Roan. I think something which is spoken about a lot in reference to Chapel Roan and her controversies are parasocial relationships. Chapel choosing to assert boundaries with her fans. And again, a lot of the backlash she receives from her fans is rooted in the parasocial relationship they have with her, because when she says something that disappoints them, they feel personally attacked. They feel personally hurt because they're so disappointed in someone they feel like they know. They place her on a pedestal, and then when she does disappoint them, because you know, no matter what celebrity you put on a pedestal, they will disappoint you once. You know, it feels so personal to them. And this is where surveillance comes in. This is where the surveillance of it all comes in. You know, whether they're choosing to take photographs of her out in public or choosing to air their grievances on social media, in my opinion, mirrors that of someone surveilling their own friends and family almost out of a place of love. You know, people taking pictures with their friends, you know, people calling out their friends when they think they're doing something a bit shit. Perhaps this behavior does mirror how we surveil the people in our real lives. And because it feels so normal, so natural, surveilling our friends and family has just become a way of life, it doesn't surprise me that this behavior inevitably bleeds out into the way that we surveil celebrities who we have parasocial relationships with. You know, this is just a very small trail of thought. This is just a theory. This is just a theory. I'd love to know what you guys think. It's honestly just like a trail of thought I had whilst I was writing this video. But I do want to take a little quick segue, you know, whilst we're talking about parasocial relationships, as someone who is, I don't like saying this word, but a puppet public figure. Someone who is a public figure, I, have been on the end of people who essentially have like a parasocial relationship with me, right? And I've noticed that people do overstep when something, in your personal life happens. But, something that really makes me laugh about parasocial relationships and people saying that the fans who are turning against Chapel Roan have, really warped and distorted parasocial relationship with her. They feel like they're friends with her, all this. The first thing I think is, God damn, you treat your friends like this? I think we can start tying everything we've been speaking about today, tabloid culture, surveillance culture, the panopticon, we can tie this all to the Gynapticon. I have never heard of the Gynapticon before researcher Leanne found it. Shout out researcher Leanne! All day, every day, shout out researcher Leanne. The Gynapticon is described as a gendered neoliberal variation on the panopticon, where the many women watch the many women. And to quote Leanne's research, it involves peer surveillance among women, particularly in digital and social media context. It includes various digital self-surveillance practices like self-tracking devices, beauty apps, and photo filters. Unlike the traditional panopticon model or male gaze, the Gynapticon positions women as active subjects and producers of their own to be looked at-ness, rather than passive objects. And I do just want to make it clear that not all surveillance culture is bad. Countless influencers and celebrities have built entire brands, empires from self-surveilling. My entire job is through self-surveilling. But I definitely think that the Gynapticon is worth thinking about as women who are social media users. I don't think I'm wrong in saying that. I think a lot of the fans who are picking apart Chapel Roan are women. She has a majority female fan base. And if we just tie this all back to tabloid culture, the largest consumers of tabloid magazines are women. Gynapticon, baby, boom. The way we surveil ourselves and the way we surveil other women, although it can be beneficial in the celebrity space, in the influencer space, in a way, are we not policing ourselves to better adhere to patriarchy? Because with a lot of the Chapel Roan controversy, especially I'm talking about the backlash from her fans specifically, a lot of the time people aren't really taking issue with what she says, more how she says it. Because on the internet, there is a specific way you have to speak, where you have to completely cover your back from any misinterpretation and whataboutisms. And I would say that this phenomenon does impact female celebrities more. The reason, and I'm going to wrap this video up here because it's getting so dark outside, but the reason why I'm making this video is because not only do I find this really interesting, but I want everybody, including myself here, to really think about and dissect their own actions and where they come from, because nothing exists in a vacuum. Nothing exists in a vacuum. I want us to dissect our own actions. I want us to dissect the actions of others. We often think of tabloid culture as something that is behind us. We look back on the treatment of Britney Spears, Amy Winehouse, Whitney Houston, Jessica Simpson as abhorrent actions of the past that we have learned from. But have we really? Because our interest in tabloids hasn't gone away. The tabloids we consume have just changed shape. Not only do we as individuals play a much larger role in tabloid culture, but tabloidism and surveillance culture have become so pervasive that it's beginning to bleed out of the celebrity sphere, and it's beginning to affect everyday people via TikTok tabloids. Gone are the days of the many watching the few. It is now the many watching the many. But yes, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. It got a little bit dark outside, but I will say, mood lighting, hello, my studio is really giving right now. But yes, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. This essay was honestly such a pleasure to write. I thought it was so interesting. I'd love to know you guys' thoughts. As always, shout out to my team. Thank you, researcher Leanne. Thank you, editor Kath, for everything that you do for me. But yes, I hope you guys really enjoyed this video, and I will see you in a couple of weeks for another one. Bye.